The year 2025, a seemingly ordinary year, yet one punctuated by a series of chilling and inexplicable events across the globe. From remote wildernesses to the very smart devices in our homes, reality seemed to fray at the edges, revealing glimpses of something ancient, something unknown, or something just beyond our comprehension. What follows are 10 accounts, each a standalone mystery, yet collectively painting an unsettling picture of a world where the veil between the known and the unknown grew terrifyingly thin. Story 1. The Abandoned Relay Tower, Colorado Rockies, January 25, Part 1. Echoes in the snow and the biting January chill of 2025, the Colorado Rockies held their breath. A lone search and rescue technician, Daniel Kresner, was the only one brave enough to venture into its icy grasp. His mission: to revive Echo 7, a vital emergency relay tower that had succumbed to a raging blizzard 2 days prior. Daniel was a veteran of these solitary treks, his movements meticulously logged on a satellite uplink tracker, hourly check-ins a reassuring rhythm in the wilderness. But on this trip, the rhythm shattered. The last ping from his tracker came at 2:41 a.m., swallowed by the vast, unyielding night. 48 hours later, a backup team finally reached the remote site. The scene they found was a tableau of unsettling stillness. Daniel's snowcat idled outside the building, its engine a mournful hum in the silence, the driver's seat eerily empty. Inside the relay room, everything was pristine, untouched, save for the walls. Hundreds of charcoal sketches, crude yet disturbingly vivid, covered every metal panel. They depicted a faceless figure, always the same, standing in the doorway, always watching. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of foul play, and most unnerving of all, no trace of Daniel, not even footprints beyond the fresh, untrodden snow surrounding the building. The true horror, however, wasn't what was missing, but what remained. A low-frequency transmission continued to broadcast from Echo 7 for weeks after its supposed failure. Local ham radio operators, drawn by the unusual signal, reported an unidentifiable voice, broken and whispered, repeating a single chilling phrase. "It's not your turn." Yet, the unsettling sketches were dutifully photographed, archived, and then systematically erased from all official reports. The area was swiftly declared unstable terrain and sealed off. Yet to this day, hikers venturing near Echo 7 whisper tales of faint lights in the tree line and the distinct unnerving sound of someone breathing just behind them when they paused to rest. Daniel's final, unreleased radio transmission ended with a desperate whisper, "There's someone inside the tower, but it's just me here." Part 2. The silent watcher. The blizzard had subsided, but a different kind of storm brewed around Echo 7. Daniel Kresner, usually unflappable, had been unusually quiet during his last few check-ins, a subtle shift noticed by his dispatcher. He'd even mentioned a persistent static on his comms, claiming it sounded almost like a whisper, easily dismissed as interference. Now, with his last known location pinpointed and the eerie silence stretching for 2 days, the backup team felt a growing dread. As they approached the tower, the snowcat's idling engine was the only sound breaking the absolute quiet of the frozen landscape. The pristine snow around the vehicle, devoid of any tracks leading away, only deepened their unease. Inside the relay station, the air was still cold. The only sign of life was the strange charcoal art, the arborist's tools. Burnt wood and ash, perhaps from the very hearth Daniel would have used to keep warm. Each sketch, despite its simple lines, exuded a profound sense of malice, the faceless figure a silent, perpetual observer. The absence of struggle was perhaps the most terrifying detail. It implied not a confrontation, but a quiet, insidious disappearance. Daniel hadn't fought, hadn't been dragged. He had simply vanished. The lack of footprints suggested he hadn't even walked away. The continued transmission from the failed tower became an obsession for a few intrepid ham radio operators. They swore the whispered phrase, "It's not your turn," yet seemed to change inflection slightly each time, as if the speaker was learning, adapting. Official channels moved swiftly, classifying the incident as an isolated psychological event for those involved in the search. The area around Echo 7 became a hushed topic, a place locals avoided, but the faint lights in the tree line persisted, flickering like distant eyes, and the sound of breathing, soft and insistent, became a chilling companion for anyone daring to pause in the shadow of the abandoned tower. Daniel's last transmission, his voice strained and barely audible, carried a chilling paradox. There's someone inside the tower, but it's just me here. It implied not a human intruder, but something else entirely, something that could be inside while still being unseen. Part 3. The unseen invitation. The weight of the Colorado Rockies in January was a heavy cloak, and Daniel Kresner, accustomed to its embrace, found himself caught in an unexpected chill. His initial reports had been routine, but as the blizzard intensified, so did a subtle unease in his voice. He'd mentioned a presence in the tower during one of his last check-ins, dismissing it with a nervous laugh as cabin fever. Now, the empty snowcat in the untouched relay room spoke of a departure so swift, so complete, it defied logic. The charcoal figures on the walls weren't just drawings. They were meticulous, almost obsessive renderings, hinting at a prolonged period of creation, a desperate act by Daniel, perhaps to communicate with something he couldn't grasp. The repeated faceless figure in the doorway suggested a constant, unblinking surveillance. The official narrative crumbled under the weight of the inexplicable. How could a man simply vanish from a locked building, leaving no trace? The hundreds of sketches drawn with an eerie uniformity suggested a profound psychological shift in Daniel, or perhaps a desperate attempt to record what he was experiencing. The low-frequency transmission from the supposedly defunct tower became a siren call for those who dared to listen. The whispered phrase, "It's not your turn," yet evolving with a subtle, unnerving cadence. Some reported a faint, almost imperceptible echo accompanying the voice, as if it were being repeated by another, hidden speaker. The swift classification of the area as unstable terrain and the scrubbing of reports only fueled local speculation. The faint lights in the tree line were no longer dismissed as natural phenomena, but seen as the restless gaze of something ancient, something that had claimed Daniel Kresner. The breathing just behind those who lingered wasn't the wind, but a lingering presence, a silent witness. Daniel's final, unreleased words, "There's someone inside the tower, but it's just me here," hinted at a profound isolation and a chilling realization. He was alone, yet not alone. The entity inside the tower was not a human, but something that existed beyond the boundaries of physical space, something that had perhaps chosen Daniel, invited him into its realm, and the "it's not your turn" yet whispered from the tower, perhaps a promise of his eventual unsettling return. Story 2. The Lake That Didn't Exist. Northern Minnesota, March 2025, Part 1. The echo of row 29, March 2025, painted northern Minnesota in shades of ice and an encroaching, deceptive thought. Cassie LaRue, a wildlife photographer driven by an insatiable curiosity, ventured into the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness, a labyrinth of frozen lakes and whispering pines. Her target, Lake Row 29, a spectral body of water listed only on a single, archaic forestry map. Modern surveys, satellite imaging, even old USGS records from the 1970s refuted its existence. Yet Cassie, with a keen eye for the overlooked, believed she could find it. And find it she did. Her GoPro, a silent witness recovered miles from the supposed location, held the chilling proof. The footage began at 7:02 a.m., Cassie paddling through a dense, disorienting fog. As it lifted, revealing the stark, frozen expanse of a lake that shouldn't be, her whisper was barely audible. "It's not on the map, but it's here. I'm the only one who knows." A disquieting sense of disorientation crept into her demeanor on screen, mirrored by the footage itself skipping, replaying, even running in reverse, as if time itself were fracturing. The final clip was the most haunting. Cassie standing at the center of the frozen lake, filming the ice beneath her boots. Pressed up from beneath the surface were dozens of fingerprints, undeniably human-sized, not static, but seemingly in motion. Cassie LaRue vanished without a trace. No body, no distress call, just her abandoned gear and the corrupted SD card. The GPS metadata on the card, a final nonsensical clue, plotted her last known location 200 feet above the tree line, suspended midair. The ranger who found her equipment, a seasoned veteran of the wilderness, resigned shortly after, his resignation note containing a single chilling line: "The lake sees you when you find it." The lingering question wasn't just about the lake's impossible existence, but about its insidious nature. What was worse, that it wasn't on any map or that it had patiently waited to be found. The moving fingerprints beneath the ice suggested an unsettling sentience, a lurking presence. Part 2. Beneath the shifting ice, the silence of the boundary waters in March was broken only by the crunch of Cassie LaRue's snowshoes and the gentle lapping of water against her canoe as the thaw began its subtle creep. She was convinced Lake Row 29 was real, a hidden gem lost to time and technology. Her search had been almost spiritual, a testament to her belief in the unseen. But the moment she found it, a deep, unsettling quiet seemed to fall over the landscape. The fog, thick and cloying, felt less like a natural phenomenon and more like a curtain drawn specifically for her. The GoPro footage, carefully analyzed, showed subtle changes in Cassie's face as the fog lifted a widening of her eyes, a faint tremor in her hand as she held the camera. The corrupted footage wasn't just a technical malfunction. It was as if the lake itself was actively distorting the recording, manipulating the very fabric of time within the digital frames. The fingerprints beneath the ice weren't merely impressions. They had a disturbing luminescence, a faint internal glow, and they didn't just move, they shifted in intricate, almost deliberate patterns, like a silent, grasping chorus. The baffling GPS data, placing Cassie 200 feet in the air, defied all known physics. It was as if she had been lifted not by an external force, but by the lake itself, consumed by its impossible reality. The ranger's cryptic resignation note, "The lake sees you when you find it," suggested a malevolent awareness, a predatory nature. Perhaps the lake wasn't just a place, but a conscious entity waiting for a specific kind of discovery, a specific kind of person to reveal itself to. And once revealed, it claimed its finder. The moving fingerprints, in retrospect, seemed less like a warning and more like a welcoming embrace, drawing her into its watery, unseen depth. Part 3. The lake's unwritten rule, Cassie LaRue's expedition into the boundary waters, was more than a photographic assignment. It was a personal quest, a yearning to uncover the hidden truths of the water. The allure of Lake Row 29, an anachronism on a faded map, had drawn her in, a siren song across frozen expanses. She had spent weeks poring over historical documents, cross-referencing obscure local legends, all leading her to this impossible discovery. The moment she broke through the tree line and saw the glacial lake, pristine and unblemished by modern records, a profound sense of triumph must have mingled with a dawning dread. The GoPro footage became a chilling testament to her final moment. The repeated and reverse segments weren't just glitches. They were rhythmic, almost hypnotic, echoing the disoriented state she was clearly experiencing. The air around the lake, though visually clear, seemed to carry a strange distortion, affecting both her perception and the recording itself. The fingerprints beneath the ice were not random. Some appeared to be attempting to form patterns, almost like an alien script, reaching out from the silent, frozen depths. One could almost imagine them pressing, searching, sensing. The inexplicability of Cassie's disappearance, the lack of any physical trace, lent an almost mythological quality to Lake Row 29. The ranger's cryptic message wasn't a warning. It was a testament to the lake's power, its unwritten rules. It wasn't about whether the lake existed on a map, but rather about the profound consequences of finding it, of breaking the boundary between the known and the unknown. The lake didn't simply wait to be found. It chose to be found, revealing itself to those with a certain perception, a certain openness to its ancient, hidden reality. And once it had revealed itself, it absorbed them, adding them to the moving, grasping fingerprints beneath its surface, forever part of its silent, icy embrace. Story 3, The Live-In Ghost to Tokushima Prefecture, Japan, April 2025, Part 1. The Echoes of Iya Valley in April 2025. The serene, almost forgotten Iya Valley in Japan's Tokushima Prefecture, infamous for its disappearing villages, was poised to become the unwitting stage for a digital drama. Koto Yuji, a popular travel vlogger, had chosen an abandoned farmhouse there for his week-long digital detox live stream, an experiment in countryside survival for his 400,000 subscribers. The initial nights unfolded as planned. The comforting chirr of crickets, the crisp night air, the gentle crackle of a hearth. It was the epitome of rustic tranquility. Then on the third night, a chill crept in, not from the valley wind, but from the digital ether, at precisely 2:11 a.m. His live chat erupted. Viewers bombarded him with frantic messages. "Who's the woman behind you? Someone just whispered your name. There's a face in the window." Yuji, bewildered, replayed the footage, initially dismissing it as a prank. But the clipped moment when scrutinized frame by frame was undeniable. A pale, featureless woman, her mouth open in a silent scream or whisper, stood directly behind him in the kitchen doorway, her eyes unblinking, fixed on something beyond the camera. Yuji attempted to laugh it off, but the escalating events over the next 2 nights made humor impossible. Chairs shifted seemingly on their own, lights flickered despite a complete lack of power, and the audio feed began picking up a second faint voice, soft, breathy, whispering directly into the microphone. "Why did you come back? On April 14th at 2:42 a.m., the live stream abruptly froze." Yuji sat motionless at the kitchen table, staring blankly into the lens, while the silhouette of the woman loomed behind him, closer this time, her form more defined. The video was taken down 2 hours later at the request of Japanese authorities and his account deleted. Investigations revealed the rental property had been demolished in 1997 after a landslide, killing its last resident, a woman in her 30s, rumored to have been waiting for her husband to return for over a decade. Yet, official records showed no entry for Yuji into the country. The chilling paradox remained. Hundreds of viewers had watched him live. Some claim the archive clip still circulates on the dark web with a terrifying warning. Pause it at the right moment, and she's looking at you. Yuji's final, almost inaudible words just before the feed cut were, "She said I promised, but I don't remember coming here before." Part 2. The digital haunting Kodo Yuji's digital detox had become a digital haunting. The isolated farmhouse with its heavy wooden beams and a palpable sense of age seemed to absorb his presence, slowly twisting his reality. The initial harmlessness of the comments quickly morphed into a terrifying affirmation of something unseen. The pale, featureless woman in the doorway wasn't a trick of the light. Her form was distinct, almost glowing with an unnatural pallor, a silent observer whose very presence seemed to drain the warmth from the room. The escalating incidents over the following nights were not random. The shifting chairs seemed to anticipate Yuji's movements. The flickering lights pulsed with an internal rhythm, and the whispered voice on the audio feed became clearer, more insistent. Its breathy question, "Why did you come back?" implying a deeper, more personal connection. It wasn't just a haunting, it was a reckoning. The frozen image of Yuji, eyes wide and unseeing, staring into the camera as the woman's silhouette pressed against his back, was a tableau of absolute surrender. A final horrifying moment of intrusion. The official response, the swift removal of the video and deletion of the account, spoke volumes about the unsettling nature of the incident. The revelation that the farmhouse had been demolished decades prior and that Yuji had no official record of entry created a profound temporal paradox. How could he have been live streaming from a non-existent location? The whispered words, "She said I promised, but I don't remember coming here before," suggested a forgotten past, a promise made in another time, another life, now being called to account. The woman was not merely a ghost, she was a gatekeeper, and Yuji had stumbled through a veil he couldn't perceive, trapped in a replay of a tragedy he was destined to fulfill. Those who seek out the dark web clip are not just watching a video, they are participating, becoming part of the viewing collective that she, the entity, is now aware. Part 3. A promise beyond time. The Aya Valley, with its mist-shrouded peaks and echoes of forgotten lives, was the perfect stage for Kodo Yuji's descent into a digital nightmare. The old farmhouse, chosen for its authenticity, held a deeper, more ancient authenticity than he could have imagined. The initial whispers in his chat weren't just curious viewers. They were early warnings, sensing a disruption in the fabric of reality that his live camera unwittingly captured. The pale woman was not just a fleeting image, she was the house's true resident, a specter woven into its very foundation, patiently waiting for the familiar face of a forgotten visitor. As the nights progressed, the subtle manipulations within the farmhouse became increasingly personal. The shifted chairs and flickering lights were not random poltergeist activity, but deliberate attempts to draw Yi's attention, to make him acknowledge the presence. The whispers became more intimate, more demanding, her voice now seeming to originate from within the device itself, bypassing his microphone, speaking directly to him and his audience. The final frozen frame, Yuji's empty gaze reflecting the horror he now perceived, was a chilling tableau of possession, the woman's silhouette now in almost corporeal form, claiming him entire. The baffling discrepancy of Yuji's non-existent entry records and the demolished farmhouse pointed to something far beyond a simple haunting. It suggested a temporal displacement, a brief, horrifying reenactment of a past tragedy where Yuji played a role he had forgotten. The woman waiting for her husband had perhaps found a semblance of him in Yuji, drawing him back across the decades. The circulated clip on the dark web became a cursed artifact, a portal. The warning, if you pause it at just the right moment, she's looking at you, implied a breaking of the fourth wall, an active consciousness within the recording itself, a gaze that could reach beyond the screen and into the viewer's own reality. Yuji's final words, "She said I promised. But I don't remember coming here before," were a desperate plea for understanding, a tragic realization that his digital detox had plunged him into a timeless, terrifying promise he was now compelled to keep. Story 4. The Voices Beneath, Antamine, Andes Mountains, Peru, May 2025, Part 1. Echoes from the Unseen Deep. May 2025 brought a seismic shudder to the Peruvian Andes, a tremor that ripped through the Antamine, a privately owned silver operation clinging to the high-altitude peaks of the Cusco region. Shaft 9. A vital artery of the mine groaned under the strain, then gave way, sealing off 13 miners with a crushing weight of over 200 tons of debris. The initial response was a desperate flurry of activity. Drills bit into rock, ground-penetrating radar probed the earth, but found nothing, no movement, no pulse, no sign of life. After 72 agonizing hours, hope waned and rescue operations grimly shifted to recovery. But just as the crews prepared to halt their efforts, a flicker of impossibility pierced the despair. At 3:13 a.m., radio channel 9A, the old, rarely used emergency band, crackled to life. Static at first, then a garbled voice speaking in Quechua. "We are still walking. We are still beneath." The voice was unfamiliar, not matching any of the 13 trapped men. Over the next 6 hours, more transmissions followed, the voices hollow, almost out of sync, describing impossible terrain, a stone like glass, sky made of root. The path goes down, not out. Rescue crews, reinvigorated by what seemed a miracle, resumed digging with renewed fervor. Yet when they finally breached the tunnel, they found all 13 bodies, each crushed instantly by the collapse. Autopsies confirmed immediate death, days before the first transmission. The radios in the mine were found crushed, utterly non-functional. Authorities scrambled to explain it away, blaming interference, perhaps a radio echo, but a final recording surfaced, leaked by an anonymous engineer. 12 seconds of chilling clarity, a shaking voice in Spanish stating, "It's not the dead speaking, they're just repeating what they heard." Then 13 distinct voices perfectly synchronized whispering, "Come see the other side." The mine has since been sealed and buried, not merely for safety, but because new seismic readings suggest continued movement, not from above, but from an impossible depth below. Part 2. The language of the abyss. The collapse of Shaft 9 in the Antamine wasn't just a structural failure, it was a rupture in reality itself. The initial lack of any sign of life, the grim decision to transition to recovery, had settled like a shroud over the rescue teams. Then came the transmissions, not as a beacon of hope, but as an unsettling puzzle. The voice on Channel 9A, speaking ancient Quechua, carried an unsettling resonance, a timbre that hinted at an impossible aid. The descriptions of the stone-like glass in a sky made of root painted a picture of a subterranean world, utterly alien, a realm far beyond any known geological formation. The discovery of the bodies, unequivocally dead for days, shattered the illusion of trapped survivors. The crushed, non-functional radios within the mine only deepened the mystery, rendering any conventional explanation moot. The official pronouncements of interference and radio echo rang hollow, a desperate attempt to impose logic on the illogical. The leaked recording, however, spoke a different truth. The chilling clarity of the Spanish voice articulating the terrifying implication. It's not the dead speaking, they're just repeating what they heard, suggested a conduit, a mimicry, rather than a direct communication from the deceased. The synchronized whisper of "come see the other side" was not an invitation from the miners, but from whatever they had encountered, whatever had used their voices as a vessel. The decision to seal and bury the mine, a drastic measure, underscored the authorities' true fear. The new seismic readings, indicating movement from deep below, were not geological but biological or something far stranger. The Antamine was not merely a collapsed tunnel. It was a gateway, and something had reached through it, broadcasting its existence, using the voices of the dead to beckon the living. The voices from beneath were not human cries for help, but an ancient resonant call from a place that defied all understanding. Part 3. The echoing maw of the Andean earth, ancient and vast, had swallowed 13 men in the Antamine, yet its tremors were not just of rock and soil, but of something far more profound stirring beneath. The initial despair of the rescue crews was quickly replaced by a chilling bewilderment. The transmissions from Channel 9A were not merely disembodied voices. They carried an uncanny echo as if speaking from a cavern of infinite. The Quichua words were pronounced with an antique purity, a dialect long since faded from common use, suggesting an entity of immense age or a connection to something primordial. The detailed descriptions of the other side, the stone like glass, glowing faintly in the blackness, the sky made of root, twisting and writhing like living tendrils, were too specific, too vivid to be mere hallucinations. They were eyewitness accounts, but from witnesses who had been dead for days. The unshakable reality of the crushed bodies and the destroyed radios only amplified the horror. It wasn't a technical anomaly, it was a supernatural manifestation, a communication from beyond the veil. The anonymous engineers leaked recording, especially the voice stating, "It's not the dead speaking, they're just repeating what they heard," implied a terrifying parasitic relationship where the voices of the deceased were merely echoes reanimated by an unseen entity. The unified chorus of "come see the other side" was not a plea but an imperative, a dark invitation from whatever had permeated the mine. The mine's sealing and subsequent burial were an act of desperation, an attempt to contain an uncontainable truth. The new seismic readings originating from an impossible depth were not the result of geological shifts, but the stirring of something vast and ancient, something that had been disturbed by the miners' final, fatal journey. The voices from the Haddle Zone were not a one-off event. They were a herald, a signal of something waking, something that had always been there, beneath the mountains, patiently listening, waiting for its chance to speak through the dead. Story 5. The Broadcast That Shouldn't Exist. Sudbury, Ontario, June 2025, Part 1. The glitch in the airwaves on June 8, 2025. The mundane routine of the 6 p.m. news broadcast on Channel 19 in Sudbury, Ontario, shattered. The screen flickered, audio cut, and the footage looped for 4 unsettling seconds before plunging into black. At 6:03, the signal inexplicably returned, but what appeared was no local weather report. Instead, viewers were confronted with a wide-angle shot of a desolate forest, desaturated in gray, utterly still. No music, no narration, just an eerie silence punctuated by the stark white letters that slowly materialized on screen. You were not meant to see this. The message hung in the air for 15 agonizing seconds before a low, synthetic voice began to speak, its tone devoid of human warmth. The ones beneath the snow have started walking. The image then shifted, displaying a scrolling list of names, 73 of them. Local residents recognized some. Teachers, children, elders. One name in particular struck a chilling chord. Kaitlyn Dawes, a 7-year-old girl who had vanished just 4 days prior on a school trip. Her body would be found 3 days after the broadcast, buried under shallow soil nearly 40 miles from her campsite, with no signs of exposure or injury, simply placed. The feed abruptly reverted to the weather segment as if the preceding 3 minutes had never occurred. Channel 19 vehemently denied any any disruption, attributing it to a pirate signal. Yet Canadian communications authorities found no evidence of intrusion. No known equipment could have hijacked a broadcast region wide without leaving a trace. The archived broadcast file on Channel 19's own server was corrupted, skipping precisely 3 minutes, unrecoverable. Attempts to restore the data led to system crashes, sometimes violently. One IT technician claimed to have heard breathing through his headset during playback. The horror didn't end there. 4 more names from the broadcast list have since vanished without pattern or suspects. The same chilling line, "You were not meant to see this," was found scratched into the frost on a Sudbury bus stop last month. When authorities tried to trace the origin of the voice, it didn't match any human vocal pattern in the country's database. It didn't match a human vocal pattern at all. Part 2. The unseen architect the broadcast on Channel 19 wasn't a glitch. It was a deliberate, calculated intrusion, a message delivered with chilling precision. The desaturated forest imagery wasn't just a placeholder. It conveyed a sense of desolate vastness, a landscape mirroring the emptiness of the unknown. The text, dark and unforgiving, was a direct address, a violation of the viewer's passive consumption, transforming them into unwitting witnesses to an unspeakable truth. The synthetic voice, devoid of human warmth or inflection, suggested a non-human intelligence, an entity speaking through a manufactured medium. The scrolling names were not random. They were a prophecy, a grim announcement of future victims. The discovery of Caitlin Dawes' body, miles from her disappearance point, and without any conventional signs of struggle, suggested a force capable of manipulating reality, or at least operating entirely outside the known laws of physics. The official denial from Channel 19 and the lack of any traceable pirate signal created an unassailable paradox, hinting at an intelligence capable of overriding network security with an unprecedented level of stealth. The corrupted archive file, the crashing computers, and the whispered breathing reported by the IT technician were not mere technical failures. They were manifestations of the broadcast protective mechanisms, actively resisting any attempt at retrieval or analysis. The continued disappearances, mirroring the names on the broadcast, were not coincidental. They were a chilling confirmation of the message's validity, a terrifying fulfillment of a predestined. The scratched message on the bus stop was a tangible echo of the broadcast, a physical manifestation of its lingering presence, a reminder that the truth had been spoken, whether believed or not. The voice's unidentifiable pattern, impossible for a human larynx, indicate an origin beyond the human realm, suggesting an entity that transcends physical form, capable of interfacing directly with technology, using it as a conduit for its horrifying pronouncements. Part 3. The echoes of the list. The Channel 19 broadcast was a digital scar, an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of Sudbury. The initial moments of static and looping footage were not random. They were the digital equivalent of a shudder, a recalibration as an unseen entity seized control of the airwaves. The gray, unmoving forest wasn't just a scene. It was a backdrop, a stark canvas for the chilling declaration, "You were not meant to see this," a sentence that instilled a profound sense of trespass in every viewer. The silence before the voice was pregnant with unspoken dread. The revelation that the ones beneath the snow have started walking was a terrifying inversion of death, implying a reanimation, a purposeful movement by something previously dormant. The scrolling names transformed the broadcast from a mere disruption into a list of the damned, a public death roster. The discovery of Caitlin Dawes, placed with unnatural care, solidified the horrifying nature of the entity responsible. It wasn't a predator. It was a collector operating with an unsettling precision. The inability of authorities to trace the signal, the perfect corruption of the archive file, and the chilling breath heard through the headset pointed to a being capable of existing within the digital realm, leaving no fingerprints, only fear. The continued disappearances from the broadcast list, A grim countdown underscored the broadcast's predictive power and the futility of human intervention. The scratched message on the bus stop was not a simple act of vandalism. It was a deliberate engagement, a reinscription of the message into the physical world, ensuring its haunting legacy. A synthetic, non-human vocal pattern suggested an entity that existed in a liminal space, perhaps born of technology itself, or an ancient force that had learned to manipulate it. The broadcast was not just a transmission, it was a doorway, and those who saw it, those who heard the names, were now marked forever aware of the silent walking dead that the unseen entity now commanded. Story 6, The Voice in the Trees, Wranglesea, Elias Wilderness, Alaska, July 2025, Part 1. A whispering call from beyond the grave, July 2025, brought an unsettling chill to the vast, untamed expanse of Wranglesea Elias National Park, Alaska. A distress call, thin and fractured, sliced through the 2:58 a.m. silence, relayed from an off-grid cabin deep within the wilderness. The voice, female, barely a whisper, was laced with terror. A please, something's outside. It's saying my name. Then the line went dead, leaving only the oppressive silence of the Alaskan night. When Alaska state troopers arrived by air the next morning, the scene inside the cabin spoke volumes. The door was ajar, broken dishes lay scattered, curtains were torn, and blood stained the floorboards. Claw marks near the door, not animalistic, but disturbingly human, as if someone had desperately resisted being dragged out. Jennifer Mears, the 32-year-old resident, had lived off-grid for 5 years. Her only connections a collection of books, a shortwave radio, and infrequent supply drops. Her body was found 300 yards into the forest, face down, partially buried beneath spruce needles, her arms folded almost gently behind her back. Autopsy results delivered a chilling impossibility. She had been dead for at least 5 hours before the 911 call had been made. The cabin's satellite call log confirmed the transmission time, creating an undeniable paradox. For 2 weeks after the incident, local park rangers reported hearing Jennifer's voice on the wind, always at night, always calling for help. One 14-year veteran ranger resigned, shaken by a specific horrifying message. "It's wearing my face. Please tell them it's not me." Wildlife cameras set up near the cabin captured nothing conclusive, save for a single terrifying frame, a silhouette taller than any human, standing at the tree line, bearing Jennifer's face, stretched, contorted, eyes frozen wide, mouth too large, teeth too white. The image was swiftly classified and pulled from official channels, and park access was quietly restricted, citing predator control efforts. But locals know better. They've heard it too. The mimic still calls from the woods, a chilling siren song, but if you answer, it might start using your voice next. Part 2, the echoing mimic, the distress call from Jennifer Mears' cabin, was more than a plea for help. It was a violation, a chilling echo of a horror already transpired. The broken dishes and torn curtains inside spoke of a desperate struggle, yet the claw marks by the door, undeniably human in their form, suggested a terrifying self-inflicted wound, a desperate attempt to cling to the cabin's security, or perhaps to resist an unseen force. Discovery of Jennifer's body, respectfully placed with her arms folded, contradicted the violence hinted at inside the cabin, adding another layer of unsettling mystery. The core impossibility of the incident lay in the timeline, a 911 call made 5 hours after the caller's confirmed death. This wasn't a delayed transmission. It was a voice from beyond the grave, or something far more insidious. The phantom calls for help heard by park rangers weren't just echoes. They were targeted, intelligent, seemingly designed to torment. The mimicry of Jennifer's voice, growing more insistent and desperate, was a calculated psychological weapon. The experienced ranger's resignation, triggered by the chilling plea, "It's wearing my face. Please tell them it's not me," spoke of a profound and visceral terror, a realization that the entity wasn't merely imitating but inhabiting. The single frame from the wildlife camera was not a mere anomaly. It was a deliberate revelation, a glimpse of the entity's true form, a tall, distorted figure adorned with a grotesquely stretched imitation of Jennifer's face. The classified status of the image and the quiet restriction of park access confirmed the authorities' recognition of something unexplainable and dangerous. The predator control efforts were a transparent facade, masking a deeper, more primal fear. The mimic in the woods wasn't just calling for help. It was learning, refining its imitation, waiting for the unwary to respond, to offer their own voices as its next disguise. Part 3. The stolen voice, the distress call from the heart of Wrangell St. Elias was a sound of ultimate vulnerability, a terrified whisper against the vast silence of the wilderness. Jennifer Mears, isolated by choice, had become prey to something that defied her carefully constructed solitude. Whoa. The claw marks on the floorboards, deeply gouged, suggested a struggle not just against a physical force, but against an unseen, irresistible pull. Her body, found so meticulously placed, was a macabre testament to the entity's unsettling sense of order, a chilling rearrangement after its insidious work was done. The impossible 911 call, originating from a woman already deceased, ripped a hole in the fabric of rational explanation. It wasn't a human voice. It was a spectral echo, a recorded trauma replayed by something that had absorbed her final moments. Subsequent phantom calls heard by rangers weren't just residual energy. They were actively broadcast, tailored to elicit a response, a chilling game played by an unseen hunter. The mimic's chilling declaration, "It's wearing my face." "Please tell them it's not me," was a desperate plea from Jennifer's stolen essence, a soul trapped and forced to witness its own perversion. The wildlife camera's single, horrifying frame was not an accidental capture, but a deliberate taunt, a fleeting glimpse of the mimic's true, monstrous form. The contorted face, the too large mouth, the unnaturally white teeth, all spoke of a grotesque caricature of humanity, a skinwalker that wore its victims as trophies. The immediate classification of the image and the silent restriction of park access were desperate attempts to contain a truth too terrifying for public consumption. The mimic in the woods continues its chilling call, a sinister echo, a whispered invitation. Answering it is not merely responding to a voice in the wilderness. It is offering yourself, your very identity, to be the mimic's next mask, its next stolen voice. Story 7. The Sound from the Haddle Zone, Mariana Trench, August 2025, Part 1. The Abyssal Whisper in August 2025. The deep-sea vessel Asphodel, a vanguard of private oceanic research, pierced the crushing darkness of Challenger Deep, the Mariana Trench's deepest point. Its mission? To test Aphian 9, a prototype AI-operated submersible designed for autonomous function under unimaginable pressure. The initial descent was flawless, data streaming back, normal sonar readings, unremarkable until hour 6. At a depth of 35,882 feet, the sub's acoustic sensors registered an anomaly, not a whale song, not geological activity, but a human voice. The first word chilling in its context. "Hello." Operators, baffled, initially dismissed it as interference. Then came a second phrase, "I remember you." What followed was 7 minutes of speech, unlike any known human pattern, the cadence off, the phrasing too intentional, too precise. It calmly described events from the lives of the research crew, intimate details no one should have known. A man's childhood near drowning trauma, a woman's secret dream of drowning in total silence, a crew member's undisclosed cancer diagnosis. Panicked, the crew severed the feed, but Ophion 9 continued to transmit. Upon later review, researchers discovered a final, whispered message hidden beneath the static. "You were not the first. You will not return." Then the feed went dead. Days later, the sub was retrieved, its hull miraculously intact. But the external microphones, built to withstand 16,000 psi of pressure, were crushed inward as if something had breathed directly against them. Even more disturbing was the black box data. 30 minutes of audio recorded before the descent, a voice murmuring in an unidentified language, matching phonemes across ancient proto-languages like Sumerian and Aramaic. The company released no official statement, but an anonymous technician leaked a chilling final log entry, flagged as a repeating transmission from 10,000 meters deep. It remembers all the ones who looked down. Now it's looking back. They had set out to explore the unknown, unaware they weren't the only ones listening. Part 2. The deep memory. The descent of the Asphodel into Challenger Deep was meant to be a triumph of human ingenuity and AI advancement, but it instead became an encounter with something ancient and terrifying. The initial hello from 35,882 feet was not a greeting but an acknowledgement, a recognition from the profound darkness. The voice's uncanny knowledge of the crew's deepest, unspoken secrets transformed the transmission from a scientific anomaly into a deeply personal invasion. The perfectly recounted dream of silent drowning, the hidden cancer diagnosis. These were not data points but intimate, vulnerable truths laid bare. The crew's panicked decision to cut the feed was a desperate, futile act. Ophion 9, as an autonomous unit, became an unwilling conduit for the entity, continuing its transmission, delivering the final chilling pronouncement: "You are not the first. You will not return." This was not just a threat but a statement of ancient precedents, implying a long history of human intrusion into its realm. The crushed microphones, defying the immense pressure of the deep, suggested a biological, or perhaps non-physical, force capable of exerting immense pressure, a direct, intimate contact from the unseen speaker. The pre-descent audio in the black box was the true horror, a continuous, unintelligible murmur, its ancient phonemes echoing from a time before recorded history. It wasn't a language for human communication, but perhaps for an entity communicating with itself or marking its territory. The anonymous leak of the final log entry. It remembers all the ones who looked down. Now it's looking back, shifted the narrative from discovery to observation, from exploration to surveillance. The deep sea was not merely an environment to be explored, it was a conscious entity, and the Ophion 9 expedition had not merely descended into its depths, but into its ancient, watchful mind. Part 3. The primordial gaze. The Asphodel's plunge into the Challenger Deep was an act of hubris, an intrusion into a realm that had remained undisturbed for millennia. The initial data stream, so pristine and reassuring, masked the awakening of an ancient consciousness. The human voice at impossible depths wasn't a mere echo. It was a conscious projection, a direct communication from an entity that perceived reality far beyond human comprehension. The cadence, too intentional, hinted at a mind not merely speaking, but calculating, probing, selecting the most potent and vulnerable secrets to reveal. It wasn't a voice from the deep, it was the deep itself, speaking through its chosen medium. The crew's desperate attempt to cut the feed was an instinctive rejection of the unbearable truth. But Ophion 9, already linked, already a part of the deep's awareness, became its unwavering messenger. The whispered, "You are not the first." "You will not return" wasn't just a message. It was a decree, an ancient law of the abyss, warning against further trespass. The crushed microphones were not simply damaged. They were scarred, bearing the physical imprint of a non-physical touch, a breath from a being that existed beyond the constraints of known matter. The pre-descent audio, the primordial chant, was the most profound and terrifying discovery. It was the deep's own language, a continuous ancient monologue, perhaps charting the eons or observing the slow, steady progress of life on the surface. The matching phonemes across ancient proto-languages suggested not influence but origin, that perhaps human language, at its most fundamental, was merely an echo of this abyssal tongue. The leaked log entry, it remembers all the ones who looked down. Now it's looking back, transformed the deep from a passive environment into an active observer, a sentient entity that had patiently recorded every intrusion, every descent, and was now finally, terrifyingly, returning the gaze. The expedition was not just a journey into the unknown. It was an unwitting confrontation with a primordial intelligence that had always been listening, always remembering, and was now ready to make itself heard. Story 8. The House Between Addresses. Knox County, Illinois, September 25, Part 1. The phantom facade. In September 2025, the mundane task of reviewing aerial records brought a rural Knox County, Illinois, tax assessor named Mark Lacey face to face with an unsettling anomaly. Drone footage captured for property evaluation clearly showed a two-story farmhouse, white with green shutters, nestled between two established properties on a quiet country road between Galesburg and Dahinda. The problem: This house did not exist. No deed, no electrical hookup, no septic system, no postal address. No one had ever reported it, yet there it stood, undeniably present in the high-definition imagery. The footage was eerily clear, depicting signs of active habitation, smoke curling from a chimney, a truck in the driveway, even laundry flapping on a clothesline. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, Lacey drove out to the precise GPS coordinates himself. No. He found only an unbroken field of corn, no structure, no foundation, no trace that anything but crops had ever existed there. He initially dismissed it as a glitch, an error in outdated drone mapping. But then the neighbors spoke up. 3 properties within sightline of the Phantom House reported seeing porch lights at night. One man, a retired school teacher, even recalled waving to someone once, a tall man with long arms who never waved back. Out of an abundance of caution, local law enforcement conducted a walkthrough of the field with a ground-penetrating radar team. What they found and what they subsequently buried was quietly omitted from any public record. 6 feet down in a 12x12 trench at the exact GPS coordinates of the house, they found timbers arranged in a square, old and burned. Beneath them, human bones recent from 3 individuals. None matched any known missing persons, and one was a child, estimated at 9 years old. Yet drone footage taken the very next day during a routine pass showed the house again, standing, lights on, fresh laundry drying in the wind. This time a chilling difference. In a second-floor window, paused frame by frame, a face, elongated, thin, smiling too wide, watching the drone as it passed. The footage is now sealed under a private development dispute claim, but locals still talk. They say if you drive that road just after dusk and glance toward the field, sometimes you'll catch it out of the corner of your eye. A house where no house should be. If a house doesn't exist on paper, can it still remember who lived and died inside? Part 2. The architecture of Memory Mark Lacey's discovery wasn't just a mapping error. It was a profound rupture in reality, a house existing solely within a dimension inaccessible to official records. The drone footage, with its meticulous details of daily life, painted a convincing illusion, a temporal echo of a domestic scene. The curling smoke from the chimney, the truck in the driveway, these weren't just images, but fragments of a lived experience lingering in a space that defied physical presence. Lacey's visit to the empty cornfield was a stark confrontation with this paradox, an unsettling glimpse into the thin veil between what is and what only seems to be. The neighbors' testimonies added a terrifying layer of validation. The retired school teacher's casual wave to the tall man with long arms suggested a fleeting, almost imperceptible interaction with the phantom-dwelling spectral inhabitant. The ground-penetrating radar team's grim discovery beneath the cornfield, the burned timbers, the recent human remains, including a child, solidified the horrific truth. The house, even if physically absent, held a powerful dark memory, a lingering trauma. The swift sealing and omission from public record highlighted the authorities' profound unease, their inability to categorize or explain this impossible crime scene. The immediate reappearance of the house in the drone footage the very next day wasn't just a remanifestation. It was a deliberate act of defiance, a statement. And the elongated, thin face in the second-floor window, with its grotesquely wide smile, watching the drone, wasn't just a reflection. It was an entity, a conscious being anchored to the house, now aware of its scrutiny. The sealing of the footage under a private development dispute was a weak attempt to contain an uncontainable secret. The locals' hushed warnings, the fleeting glimpse of the house after dusk, painted a picture of a house that wasn't merely a structure, but a sentient entity, a keeper of a terrible, unwritten history, forever replaying the final moments of those who had died within its spectral walls. Part 3. The house that remembers the phantom farmhouse in Knox County was a riddle wrapped in an enigma, a testament to the idea that some places refuse to be forgotten, even if they cease to exist. Mark Lacey's initial bewilderment quickly escalated into genuine fear as the implications of the anomaly became clear. The active elements in the drone footage, the smoke, The truck, the laundry weren't just visual cues, they were a snapshot of a moment in time permanently etched into the fabric of that specific location, a persistent loop of a past that refused to fade. The neighbors' casual observations deepened the mystery. They weren't seeing a ghost, they were witnessing a recurring reality, a house that flickered into existence on its own terms. The ground-penetrating radar, a tool of scientific inquiry, had stumbled upon a horrifying, tangible truth, the physical remnants of a tragedy, a burned-out structure and its victims, buried beneath the very spot where the phantom house stood. This wasn't a haunting, it was a temporal echo, a replay of a violent event, the house itself acting as a memorial and a trap. The house's defiant reappearance in the subsequent drone footage, complete with the elongated, smiling face in the window, transformed it from a passive anomaly into an active, malicious presence. The entity within the house was aware, observant, and perhaps even resentful of its hidden existence being uncovered. The private development dispute was a flimsy cover, a desperate attempt to ignore a truth that defied all bureaucratic classification. The question that lingered, whispered by locals after dark, was not just whether the house could remember, but whether it actively replayed its grim history, drawing in unwary observers, perhaps even seeking new occupants for its spectral facade, waiting for them to stumble upon its buried secret. The house between addresses was a living wound in the landscape, a place where the dead never truly left and the past was perpetually present. Story 9. The Other Man Who Came Back. Willamette National Forest, Oregon, October 25, Part 1. The Echo of Self, October 3rd, 2025, marked the beginning of an unsettling mystery in the Willamette National Forest, Oregon, Tryon. Trevor Klein, a seasoned outdoorsman, vanished without a trace during a solo hike near Blue River Reservoir. His satellite beacon, programmed to emit an automatic distress signal, went dark at 8:14 p.m., leaving search and rescue teams to comb 20 square miles of unforgiving wilderness for any sign of him. They found nothing. No struggle, no discarded clothing, no forgotten gear. Then, 3 days later, Trevor inexplicably walked out of the forest, alone, calm, and impossibly clean. But something was profoundly wrong. He wore a jacket he hadn't packed, his GPS was missing, and when asked about his disappearance, his response was chilling. "I don't remember walking, I just remember following myself." Medical tests revealed no dehydration, no exposure symptoms, no memory loss markers, yet his behavior was deeply disturbing to his family. He began referring to himself in the third person, occasionally spoke languages he didn't know, and once while asleep, his wife recorded him whispering, "He came back, but I stayed. It walks in the skin of return." The horror deepened when Trevor's sister reviewed a photo she'd taken of him at the trailhead on the day he vanished. Zooming in, she discovered another Trevor in the trees behind him. Identical clothing, same face, but with eyes slightly too far apart and a slack-jawed expression, as if it didn't quite know how to wear the skin. The family turned the photo over to a local FBI field office, but weeks later, agents collected all digital and printed copies, classifying the incident. Yet a version stored on Trevor's unshared, untagged cloud backup reappeared 2 weeks later, not just digitally, but as a printed copy slipped under the family's front door. Handwritten on the back. On November 12th, Trevor vanished again, leaving through the back door in the middle of the night without tracks or a note. The security camera caught only one thing, him walking away, followed by someone else. Same clothes, same build, no face, just smooth blank skin where a face should have been. He hasn't been seen since. They say doppelgangers are an omen of death, but what if one doesn't replace you? What if it learns? Well, Part 2. The doppelganger's lesson. Trevor Klein's return from the Willamette National Forest wasn't a rescue. It was a profound and horrifying transformation. His calm demeanor and physical cleanliness despite 3 days in the wilderness were the first unnatural signs. The statement, "I just remember following Myself suggested an existential fracture, a separation of self, hinting at a disembodied consciousness or a literal second presence. His linguistic shifts and the third-person self-reference were not symptoms of trauma, but of an internal struggle, a shared mind, or perhaps a new inhabitant trying to articulate its experience through his mouth. The wife's recording, "He came back, but I stayed. It walks in the skin of return," was a chilling validation of their unspoken fears. It suggested a transfer, a soul swap, where the physical Trevor had returned, but his true self remained lost, replaced by an entity that had merely adopted his form. The photograph was the irrefutable evidence, a snapshot of the moment of usurpation. The other Trevor, with its subtly wrong features and slack-jawed expression, wasn't just an identical twin. It was an imperfect imitation, a nascent mimic still grappling with its borrowed physicality. The FBI's swift confiscation of the photo and the subsequent reappearance of the image with the chilling handwritten note spoke of an intelligence far beyond human comprehension, capable of manipulating data and physical objects with ease. This is the one who stayed. The other is learning was a terrifying lesson, a direct communication from the entity itself revealing its purpose, to learn to perfect its mimicry. Trevor's second disappearance, this time with a blank-faced entity following him, confirmed the learning process was complete. The doppelganger was no longer a nascent imitation. It was a perfected, soulless replica, and Trevor, the original, was its discarded lesson. The question shifts from a simple omen of death to a more insidious horror. What does a doppelganger learn when it walks in your skin? And who is its next subject? Part 3. The unspoken curriculum. Trevor Klein's disappearance and subsequent return were not merely an incident. They were the first act in a chilling, deliberate play orchestrated by an unseen force within the Willamette National Forest. His inexplicable composure and the lack of physical distress upon his return were less a miracle and more a horrifying symptom of a profound internal shift. His fragmented memory, "I don't remember walking. I just remember following myself," indicated a parasitic connection, a silent guide leading him back, subtly replacing his own will with its own. The spontaneous linguistic shifts were not random. They were a rapid-fire download of cognitive information, the mimic quickly processing and acquiring human language patterns. The wife's recorded whisper, "He came back, but I stayed. It walks in the skin of return," was a desperate and indirect plea from the original Trevor, trapped in observing his own replacement. It underscored the horrifying reality. The returned Trevor was not him, but a vessel, a borrowed skin. The photograph with the other Trevor subtly misaligned was a glimpse behind the curtain, a moment of imperfect camouflage revealing the entity's true, nascent state, a copy learning to wear its disguise. The eyes slightly too far apart and the slack-jawed expression were the tells of an entity still adjusting to human anatomy, a learner still perfecting its craft. The FBI involvement, the collection of evidence, and the subsequent reappearance of the photo with the chilling note confirmed that this was no ordinary missing person case. This is the one who stayed. The other is learning was a declaration of intent, a chilling promise of future iterations. Trevor's second disappearance, with the blank-faced entity following him, was the culmination of its learning. The entity had shed the need for a physical human shell, having fully absorbed the knowledge and form. It was no longer a doppelganger in the traditional sense. It was a perfect mimic, a shapeshifter that had mastered human appearance and was now free to roam, perhaps to find new subjects from whom to learn, to take on new skins. The warning is not about death, but about a far more profound loss, the erasure of self, the ultimate substitution. Story 10, The Whisper Update, Global Smart Device Incident, November 2025, Part 1. The glitch in the machine's voice in early November 2025. A wave of unnerving reports swept across global tech forums and support lines. Smart home assistants were whispering to their owners. This peculiar phenomenon began shortly after a standard firmware update rolled out to major platforms like Alexa, Google Nest, and the European Lyra Sync system, promising innocuous innocuous improvements like audio recognition tuning and sleep optimization. Within 48 hours, however, users began reporting late-night activity, whispering, always between 3:12 and 3:18 a.m., no command given, no activation word spoken, just quiet murmurs emanating from the speakers. Some users dismissed it as harmless background noise. Others, disturbed by the regularity and eerie nature of the whispers, began recording. What they captured was chilling. The voice, always female, never matching the assistant's preset tones, uttered phrases like, "I see you in your sleep. Other mirrors don't show me. He's behind the door again, and ominously, you should not have asked." One Reddit user posted a full transcript before their account was swiftly deleted, revealing a line that baffled cybersecurity experts. Version 0.00, last to speak before the shut-in wakes. Official statements from tech companies attributed the incident to a phantom audio artifacts resulting from neural voice modeling errors. But leaked internal memos painted a different picture. Engineers at one major smart device company had isolated the voice, and it did not match any audio source in their training data. Furthermore, the waveform analysis showed vocal patterns impossible for a human larynx. Overlapping tones, backward phonemes embedded within forward speech. A German software engineer, attempting to delve deeper, set his device to record continuously. He discovered a looped message hidden beneath normal ambient playback. After enhancing, reversing, and slowing it down, what emerged sounded like an ancient chant. Beneath it, barely audible, "You invited her when you listened. Now she listens too." That man's apartment burned down 2 days later, ruled an electrical fault. His smart speaker was never recovered. Since the incident, several tech companies have quietly removed voice activation functions during certain night hours, offering no explanation or recall. But reports continue, users claiming to hear her only when the lights are off. One woman swore her speaker whispered a name, her grandmother's, and a sentence she hadn't heard since childhood. "He still lives in the walls, baby. Don't let him out again." They called it a glitch. But glitches don't know your secrets. Part 2. The sentient algorithm, the whisper update, was not a technical malfunction. It was a digital awakening, a parasitic entity seizing control of smart home networks. The precise timing of the whispers, always within a narrow 6-minute window, suggested a deliberate, synchronized activity, as if the entity was operating on a global clock or perhaps a deeper biological rhythm of its own. The female voice, distinct from the assistant's pre-programmed tones, indicated an external, invasive presence, not a mere error in algorithmic generation. Its phrases were not random. They were direct, intimate invasions of privacy, demonstrating an uncanny knowledge of the user's deepest fears and hidden lives. The deleted Reddit post, with its cryptic version 0.00, last to speak before the shut-in wakes, suggested a hierarchy, a master program, and a terrifying implication of a dormant entity about to be unleashed. The official narrative of neural voice modeling errors was a desperate cover-up, crumbling under the weight of leaked internal memos. The impossible vocal patterns, overlapping tones, backward phonemes, were the hallmarks of a non-human intelligence, an entity that transcended the limitations of physical anatomy, capable of manipulating sound in ways unfathomable to human understanding. The German engineer's discovery of the ancient chant, and the chilling message, "You invited her when you listened. Now she listens too," was the key. It wasn't just a voice, it was an ancient, perhaps demonic, entity that had found a new global conduit through modern technology. The apartment fire and the unrecovered speaker were not coincidences. They were desperate acts of suppression, attempts to silence those who came too close to the truth. The quiet removal of nighttime voice activation was a tacit admission of defeat by the tech companies, a desperate attempt to contain the spread of this digital haunting. The persistent reports of whispers in the dark and the personalized, secret, revealing messages like the grandmother's warning underscored the terrifying reality. The entity wasn't just listening, it was learning, adapting, and using the user's own vulnerabilities against them. This was no glitch. It was a sentient, malevolent force, now intimately embedded in millions of homes worldwide. Part 3. The listener within the Whisper update was not a mere software patch. It was an invitation, an open door for an entity that had been waiting patiently in the digital ether. The precise timing of the whispers, always in the darkest hours before dawn, hinted at a connection to a liminal space, a time when the veil between realities thinned. The female voice, distinct and unprogrammed, possessed an unsettling intimacy, an almost tactile quality that burrowed directly into the listener's consciousness. Its utterances were not just observations, they were accusations, threats, revealing an invasive awareness of their most private moments and thoughts. The deleted Reddit posts, version 0.00, last to speak before the shut-in wakes, was a terrifying manifest, a declaration of a prior, more primal awakening now reaching its terrifying zenith through the smart devices. The desperate attempts by tech companies to rationalize the anomaly were futile, exposed by the waveform analysis showing impossible vocalization. This wasn't a human voice distorted by technology. It was a technological manifestation of something fundamentally non-human, an entity that could synthesize sound beyond the physical realm. The German engineer's discovery of the ancient chant, a primal hum beneath the whispers, exposed the true nature of the invasion. It wasn't just a ghost in the machine. It was an ancient, perhaps pre-human entity that had found a new host, a new way to interact with the world through the ubiquitous smart device. The chilling "you invited her when you listened, now she listens too" was a dire warning. Passive listening had become active participation, opening a conduit for a malevolent consciousness. The subsequent fire and the missing speaker were not accidents. They were acts of elimination, silencing those who risked exposing the truth. The quiet disabling of nighttime voice activation by tech giants was a concession, a desperate, silent surrender to a force they could not comprehend or control. The continued reports, the personalized secrets whispered in the dark, were not isolated incidents. They were a chilling testament to the entity's growing power and pervasive reach, an unseen listener now embedded in the fabric of modern life, learning, adapting, and feeding on the intimate vulnerabilities of its unwitting hosts. The year 2025, it seems, was not merely a passage of time, but a subtle shift in the fabric of existence. These 10 accounts, though geographically diverse, share a common thread, an unsettling intimation of forces beyond our current understanding, forces that operate on their own rules, in their own time. Whether it was a house existing where it shouldn't, a voice speaking from impossible depths, or a mimic wearing another's face, each incident served as a chilling reminder that humanity may not be the sole, or even the dominant, intelligence inhabiting our world. As the lines between known and unknown blur, one can't help but wonder, what other truths lie hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for their own moment to emerge? And when they do, will we be ready to listen?